Hi, welcome to our first monthly wrap up of 2024. We're going to be talking about all the books that I read in January. I am going to try and be, like I said, more intentional, but just, I don't know how to explain it, but I just want to be a little bit more picky with my reading. I make these videos because I know that I have a lot of time to read a ton of books, and I try to help you pick what books you would like to read in a smaller amount of time, perhaps. So I'm also going to try and just be reading more diversely based on genre or anything, but also I'm trying to get my hands on more arcs so that you guys will be able to hopefully put some books on hold really early in the library and get your books fast. So this is my first month of attempting that. And so this is going to be, I think it's an interesting list of books. And so I'm excited to share the list. But before we dive in, I want to give a shout out to the sponsor of this video, which is Skillshare. We've talked about them so many times, but this year they're doing something really interesting. Skillshare is an online learning platform where you can learn about pretty much anything. And I've always hyped up all of their classes. I have a class on Skillshare if you want to learn about vlogging, but they've created a new feature called Learning Path, which essentially help organize their giant collection of classes into a sort of curriculum that will guide you to whatever goal you're trying to achieve. So they actually have a ton specifically for creative freelancers or just like content creators in general. If you guys have been playing around with the idea of getting on BookTube or YouTube in general or Bookstagram, Book Talk, I highly recommend you check out Skillshare's creative freelancer learning paths. They have some for how you can get organized and make plans about your content. They also have simply just how to speak well on camera. Just really a lot of different paths to success, I think, with some really great creators and teachers guiding you through it. So there will be a link in my description box. The first 500 people to click that link will get 1 month free of Skillshare. BookTube has changed my life in the best of ways, so I highly encourage you, if you are flirting with the idea of joining us on any platform to talk about books and you just aren't sure where to start, check that link in the description box. Highly recommend Skillshare for so many things. But yeah, thank you so much to Skillshare for sponsoring this, and let's dive in to my list. I started this month out really strong and I read Starling House. This is coming right off the heels of finishing The 6 Deaths of the Saint, which is a short story by Alix E. Harrow, which was 30 pages of just epic kind of fantasy. Just, if you didn't watch my wrap up for December, check out The 6 Deaths of the Saint. It's on Kindle Unlimited. Highly recommend. But then I just continued with the author and read Starling House, which is her latest release. This was a very good time for like 75% of the book. It was almost perfect for me. I still rated it 5 stars just because of the kind of journey it took me on, and I enjoyed it so much in the moment. This takes place in the modern real world. We are in Kentucky and we're in this small town that kind of revolves around this coal energy plant, and it just seems like this town is bad luck. There's clearly some kind of weird history there, and it's just, the town is sort of where dreams go to die, I think. And there is this one mysterious house that is beautiful, this little mansion on the hill, locked behind this gate. No one ever goes in, no one ever goes out, but our main character is just so drawn to it and she doesn't know why, and there's always this light on in the attic window that she feels is just calling to her. And one day when the gate opens for her, we learn why. It has a sentient house. It's one of those books within a book. It's all about fairy tales, and according to my notes, it had great side characters, an unsettling ending, but it stayed with me all night because I finished it at 6 p.m. I wrote that down. And I still felt my heart kind of tight and racing even as I was falling asleep hours later. So yeah, I think the book, the reason it was good for like 75% is that it didn't end the way that I like books to end. It wasn't ambiguous, but it wasn't like, I don't know, I just wasn't ready to let go of these characters. I wished that the kind of main romance was a little bit stronger, but overall I just really enjoyed, I felt like it was a very unique book, even though we're following this kind of like haunted, sentient house. We've seen these kind of details before, but the way that she put it together I thought was really unique and great, and I loved the voice of these characters. And again, side characters were excellent. So I highly recommend. I think I actually, because I think they came out at the same time, I got Starling House and A Study in Drowning kind of confused, or I like kind of thought of them as the same thing in my mind. So when I realized that this was going to be a modern day story, I was totally thrown for a loop, because I was thinking of Ava Reid style, which is usually like either the past or this ambiguous older feeling time. So for some reason that setting, modern day fantasies are really hit or miss for me, usually miss. This one hit. So that is the Starling House. I do recommend it. Next up, I'm looking at my notes. I just want to hug past me. She was going through it in the beginning of the year. The next one I read is The Witchwood Knot. This is by the same author as Half a Soul, which I absolutely adored and I highly recommend. I had a really good time with that one, and so I kind of went into The Witchwood Knot thinking, no brainer, this is going to be a great ride. Not so much. Past Me wrote, it's related to the work on Half a Soul. So there are mentions to characters within Half a Soul, and then I believe there's the Thousand Stitches. It does reference that, but I don't remember if it spoiled anything, because I honestly don't remember the character names from those books. So I think you can go into it without background. But then I also wrote, not sure what the F was going on. I almost DNF'd it, but the vibes were okay, ? Yeah, so this is another kind of haunted house-y sort of book. We follow a woman who comes to a house to be a governess. Why am I not remembering anything? She's hired by the grandma, the old woman of the house, to help her grandson. And we learn that like the house and the fairies that live around the house, for some reason, are trying to hurt the family, specifically the little boy. She really wants, the governess basically is there to watch over him over summer, so that then when he goes off to Eton, goes off to his school, he will be safe and away from the house. But like during summer, he needs to be watched at all times. It just wasn't, I really didn't understand what was going on half the time. I didn't get the romance. I just really didn't connect with it. It was one of those books where I was reading it being like, I was supposed to love this and I just don't get it. That being said, I trust with Cindy fam with my life, and she enjoyed it. So I think maybe it was just my mindset at the time. Give it a go. But just for me personally, I was lost in the sauce for this book. Extremely lost in the sauce. The next book I read is another book under the imprint of Wednesday Books. So if you still want to look up the marketing boycott, you can check out #SpeakUpSMP. As far as I know, they have not spoken up other than making it worse. And to be honest, the book was not good, so I would not be recommending it. Anyway, so next. The next book I read is actually an ARC. So this is coming out, I'll put it here when the book is set to be released. And this is called Earls Trip. Yes, it is supposed to sound like Girls Trip. This was just a funny time. It is a romance that takes place in, again, like Regency era. We follow 3 best friends who are Earls. And every year they take 10 days off and they go to a random secluded area, like a manor or a cabin or something, and they just have like a boys' vacation, and it's great, and they love each other, and it's wholesome. And this year, as they are heading out to their annual trip, our main Earl gets notified that one of his kind of childhood friends is in a bit of a bind, where his friend's sister has run off with this good-for-nothing guy, possibly eloped, and if anybody finds out, it's going to ruin her honor. Very Pride and Prejudice. You get what's happening here. So he needs to go find her, rescue her, save her honor before anybody finds out. And really what this book is, if you love found family, I think you'll really like this because it literally talks about found family. Like the Earls are talking and they come up with the term found family. It's just a lot of like people who really, really love each other. So there were many points where I felt like the plot was moving achingly slow. There were just so many conversations. Like they would after dinner just sit in the parlor and talk to each other. It was so wholesome because it was so lovely to see just like male friendships, like really wholesome male friendships, but also really wholesome friendships between like the sisters and the Earls. And it was just 5 people who just really had so much respect for each other, talking about love and life and their worries. And it was, I don't know, there was something so wonderful about it. And then, like I said, it goes very slowly, but once the romance starts, I also quite liked it. It was very much like childhood friends to lovers feeling. I don't know when that cut me off, but I didn't love that the romance did, for a good portion of it, play on the kind of naivete of Regency era women when it comes to sex. And it kind of plays off of that, like her kind of inexperience, but she's also definitely the person who is like in control and calling the shots. So I think that the author tried to balance that quite well. It's just not really my favorite thing. But yeah, I would say plot could have moved a lot faster, but if you like reading about people just truly loving each other, it was very sweet. And yeah, I had a jolly good time. That was Earls Trip. After that, I embarked on my first fan fiction. I made a video about it, but to be honest, the video's shorter than I thought it was going to be, because I thought I would be not critiquing it, but like having some, you know, funny commentary. I honestly just enjoyed the book. I just had a good time. I read Draco Malfoy and the Mortifying Ordeal of Being in Love, and it's a Dramione, Draco Hermione fanfiction. Nothing else to say other than it was damn cute. It was very much like enemies to lovers, bodyguard kind of trope, and I had a good time. Like I feel like I can't judge it as I would judge a book. I'd go into it more in the video, but I think it was way too long, way too drawn out. There were, you know, chapter notes, and the author straight up said, ignore the plot holes. So there were plot holes. It was this imperfect piece of work, but it was just a fun ride. And yeah, if you want to know more, you can watch my full video on it. But that was Draco Malfoy and the Mortifying Ordeal of Being in Love. After that, I did actually read A Study in Drowning, which is what I kind of got the Starling House kind of confused with. So this is by Ava Reid. I did not enjoy, I've only read Juniper and Thorn, and I didn't enjoy it, but A Study in Drowning I actually did really enjoy. I made a TikTok about it. I was exactly at 50%, and I was so excited to talk about it that I made a TikTok being like, hey everybody, I'm 50% of the way through and I love it. And I will say the first half is stronger than the second half, so it is an imperfect book for sure. She captured the aesthetic she was going for so perfectly that I kind of, as I was reading it, was able to just kind of not think too critically. It was only until after I finished it that I was like, I have so many questions. We essentially follow a girl who is in architecture school. She wants to study literature, but women are not allowed to study literature at her college. So she takes the second most academically challenging course, which is architecture. And she finds out that the author of the most famous work of fairy tales and legends, who she adores, he has passed away, and as part of his like final wishes, he created a contest where he wanted architecture students to come up with a new plan for his house to rebuild it for his family. And obviously she applies. She's like, okay, I fucking hate architecture but I love him, so I will build him a house. My favorite author wants a house, I'll find a way. She obviously wins the contest, and she goes down south to help build this home. Turns out that there is a literature student there as well doing research. It's supposed to be an academic rivals to lovers story. I thought that the imagery was just so excellent. It's very gray and like ocean stormy ocean colored. All of her like metaphors were related to the sea in some way. There were just these details in it that the writing was just really beautiful. Big trigger warning, I think this goes like blanket trigger warning for all of Ava Reid's work, but she does always tend to deal with sexual assault, so this plays a huge role in the story, so just be aware of that. I loved how she approached the subject in this book, but I think that a lot of things fell flat in terms of there was a lot of talk about political struggle. Like there is kind of a battle between the neighboring kingdoms, and in the beginning it's set up that you think that that's going to play a role at any point in the book, and it doesn't at all. So there's just little things that I'm like, where did we like leave that off? It felt like we put that suitcase down and then got on the train and forgot it. So yeah, I do think that the first half was really, really wonderful. The second half, the romance kind of fell apart for me. It was an enjoyable read, especially the first half. So give it a try, especially if you didn't like Juniper and Thorn. This felt very, very different to me. That is a study in drowning. I think it's going to be really hit or miss for some people. If you can look away from the plot holes and the kind of weak character, it has beautiful writing in it. But if you want like a fully perfectly formed story, that was a study in drowning. After that, I read Between Two Moons. We follow twin sisters during one Ramadan, the summer after their high school graduation, and just a lot of things happen in their little neighborhood in Brooklyn. Their brother comes home. He was in jail, and now all of a sudden he is around, and they haven't seen him in years and years and years. And it just covers a lot of interesting topics. Obviously talks about Islamophobia, but it was also just funny, and it was just wonderful to see like Muslim characters, especially Muslim women, being shown in a way that like they're like, these girls are just teenagers in New York City, and they want to go to parties, and they struggle with their faith and have such a love-hate relationship with their community and their just identity, and especially one sister struggles with it much more than the other, and it was just really well written. I'm not usually the biggest fan of contemporary family, especially like family drama kind of stories, but I thought that this one had so many layers to it. It was very bizarre to read a book about summer during one of the coldest weeks we had. So they were talking about like sweating in their apartment, and I'm sitting here like wrapped in blankets like but yeah, Between Two Moons, definitely recommend. Excellent cover too. I honestly just loved it for the cover as well. So there you go. After that, we have another arc. This is coming out, I'll put it over here. I read An Education in Malice. I really enjoyed A Dowry in Blood, A Dowry of Blood. So when I was able to get the arc for this book, I was really excited. This is a modern retelling of Carmilla, the vampire story from the 1800s, and this is a kind of academic rivals to lovers story that I thought was, again, so strong in the first half and then so boring in the second half. But we essentially follow these two students who are at this small university somewhere in New England, I think, where it is beginning of a new year, it's autumn, everything is crisp, and our freshman girl managed to get her way into a poetry class that is usually only for seniors, but her work really impressed the teacher, so she gets in there and finds that one girl in the class, a senior, is not happy to be outshone, and we begin a little academic rivals journey, but all surrounding poetry. I mean, you know that there are vampires involved, so it goes on from there. This also is an adult book, so it does also play a little bit with erotica, so there are some scenes that are quite not safe for work if you're going to be listening to an audiobook out loud. But yeah, I thought it was just really interesting until the kind of crisis unfolds, and then I was just suddenly uninterested. I would love to know your thoughts, but it kind of ticked all these boxes of a kind of dark academia feeling with academic rivals to lovers and vampires, these like women who battle each other through their poetry, and at the end of the day, it really lacked that ending, man. I just want to read a book that finishes strong, and actually looking at the list, I think I only have about one that did that this month. So this was kind of the month of great starts and fizzling out. So that was an education in Malice. Continuing with our arcs, I read Faebound, and this was so hyped up by everyone else I know who got an arc of this book, but Faebound was a DNF for me. I read exactly 50% and I just couldn't continue. This is a book that is told in multiple POVs. We follow two sisters. One is a recently promoted colonel in the army for this forever war. They are elves, and there are different courts or like different kinds of elves, and so these two kinds of elves are in a forever war, a never-ending war. On her first day as colonel, she makes a call. She goes against a direct command and ends up getting exiled from her world, her court. And then her sister and a friend follow her out through her exile to try and get her back. And of course something goes wrong, and we end up learning that everything they know about the world is wrong, and certain sisters have hidden powers, and maybe they're not who they think they are, etc. I don't know what it was, but it just wasn't clicking for me, and if it wasn't clicking at 50%, it's not a good sign. I didn't feel any connection between the sisters. I don't think the sisters ever spoke. They didn't have like any real time to sit down and have a conversation for me to really understand their dynamic. I like heard the story of their childhood from both of their POVs, but we never saw them interact as much as I would want. There's also a romance that, again, we never really saw these people interacting. We know that time passed, but I don't remember them ever having a conversation other than like when they first met and they were kind of like yapping at each other. And then one of the sisters has the gift of prophecy, and every prophecy that is supposed to be like, you know, vague and ooh, I bet this will come in later, I knew what it meant almost every single time. I could just see the author placing down clues and immediately knew what was going to happen. Like she mentioned, oh, did you know that this thing happens, but it only happens to these people? And then it's like, well, obviously one of these sisters is one of these people, you know, like it was very predictable. I just didn't feel any connection with any of the characters at all, and I could see where the story was going, and I just wasn't interested in following it. It could have just been a slow start to a new series, so maybe it was just like having trouble getting the momentum going, and maybe it could get better in the second half, so let me know. But it was just a real struggle to get halfway through. So for me, that was Faebound, a DNF. After that was another arc, my most anticipated read, potentially of the year. This was A Tempest of Tea. It should be coming out next month. I will put the exact date here. This is by the same author as We Hunt the Flame, We Free the Stars. Sorry, that took me a while. Which was a duology that I really enjoyed. And Tempest of Tea is also going to be either a duology or a full series, I'm not sure. It was inspired by Peaky Blinders, but if there were vampires. And it's all about like a tea house, and the cover is beautiful. Like I was so ready for this book. I was so ready for this book. And I thought that the first 20% was strong, setting up the world, understanding like our main girl is very much like the head of this kind of, not really a gang, but like a Peaky Blinders-esque gang, where she runs a tea house by day and then a vampire blood house by night. And I thought that all the characters had really interesting takes on colonialism. They're all from different parts of the world and all kind of suffering from various kinds of discrimination and pain and loss of not only their homeland, but in a lot of cases, their family members, and just like life opportunities and dignity. So I thought that like the setup was excellent. And then once we got into the action, I found myself confused a lot of the time. It's multiple POV, and the way that this author writes, I love her, I do, but sometimes it gets a little vague just because Hafsah tends to go more like lyrical in her storytelling, and so she will like introduce a character, like she'll have a paragraph, like a chapter will start by like, he walked in the room, he did this, he, but we don't know who he is until like the next page, and then someone says his name, and then you're like, oh, that's who we were talking about. And so then you kind of have to go back and be like, okay, this was who was doing that action. I don't know how exactly to describe it, but she did that quite often, where it was like, okay, but who? Who are we talking about? And so sometimes it would make the moment stronger when it's like, oh, it was him that she was talking about. But sometimes it was more confusing of like, but who are we talking about, right? There were just a lot of these kind of time skips and jumps and stuff like that that I was just constantly a little confused, or like I felt like I had to really concentrate on the plot and I couldn't really just get lost in the story. I was very aware that I was reading a book, if that makes sense. But I will say that is very similar to how I felt about We Hunt the Flame, and then I really loved We Free the Stars. So I will absolutely continue this duology, or whatever it is. I will continue reading this work, because so far it seems like the first book in her series or duologies are a little wonky. I think it had so many great details to it. I really liked each character and their stories. So I'm just hoping that like the next book will be stronger and will make the duology as a whole really strong. It was a little bit of a disappointment, I'm not gonna lie, but I have hope for the next book. But please let me know your thoughts, and if perhaps that was just an arc issue that maybe was corrected before it is fully released. I'm not sure, but I would still give it a go, give it a try. The Tempest of Tea. After that, I have a physical. This was given to me by Nathan. I will link him down below, Nathan's Nook. Nathan is a bookish creator and author who I ended up meeting up with, and he gave me a massive pile of books, including his own book called Adolescence Leaves. I even have a signed copy now. It follows our narrator as he tries to move on from this heartbreak, this relationship that ended when he was living in Tokyo, and now he is back in LA. It's that stage of a breakup where everything reminds you of the relationship, and there were just so many details. We bounced back and forth between present day and reminiscing on this relationship in Tokyo, and there were just so many details that were so heartbreaking but just so mundane. Like, there was a point where he talked about how he would look at the clock and do the mental math of figuring out the time difference, just totally subconsciously, and being like, he's probably eating dinner right now, or he's probably waking up and brushing his teeth. And it's just like, as someone who has had to live in a vastly different time zone from the person I love, and doing like a long distance relationship, it like hit me so hard. Like, I've been there. And it was just, I thought that it captured LA in such a great way, because for me, LA is very bizarre and kind of not real. And the way that he was kind of walking through his life in LA, it felt like he also thought, this is not real. And really just beautiful and sad. And I'm really honored that he gave this to me, and definitely recommend Adolescence Leaves. We're back. Battery change. After that, I picked up The Premonition by Banana Yoshimoto. I have enjoyed her work before, so when I saw that there was a new translation of one of her works from the 80s out, I picked it up. I purchased this book. I finished it in a couple hours, so I'm kind of bummed. But this was a book that I really don't know how I feel about it, because I enjoyed the story, but we delved into certain relationship things that I don't like reading about. I can't really go into it without spoiling it, but there were just a couple things that I was sort of like, ooh, this could go one of two ways, and I'm not really sure how I feel about it. We essentially follow a girl who for her entire life has felt, she just feels like she's missing something in her life. There's something that she like has this premonition that there's something that she should know, that she should remember, but she just doesn't. And when she slowly figures this out as she's staying with her aunt, when the truth comes to light, she has to come to terms with a lot of things. And then when her aunt goes missing, they have to go find her aunt. Like I said, I don't know how I feel about this book, because I think I enjoyed the act of reading it. I didn't think it was as strong as her other work, like the work in kitchen. But if this is at your library, I would check it out. Yeah, I really can't say any more. I also just love how shiny the cover is. I really can't say any more about it without spoiling it. It's very short. It's 130 pages. I regret purchasing it, but I don't regret reading it, if that makes sense. So that's the Premonition Banana Yoshimoto. After that, we have another arc. I will put the date down below. I read The Curious Secrets of Yesterday. This was such an interesting little book that I thought was just a smidge, more than a smidge, too long. We follow a girl who is living with her mother and grandmother in Salem, Massachusetts, where her family runs a spice shop, but specifically they are Ayurvedic healers. So not only do they sell spices, but also you can come to them and they will create certain blends for you specifically to help you with any kind of ailment. So if you know of Ayurveda, that's what they do. And our main girl is in the midst of her training to level up and take over the family business, but she really doesn't want to. And so we just kind of follow her through a few months in her life where her grandma basically gives her this deadline of like October 15th, you're going to take the test and you are going to become the new head of this family and take over the shop. And so our main girl knows that like she needs to either run away or actually voice her feelings to her family or something before she gets locked into this life that she's not interested in. We also have a mysterious neighbor that moves in to the storefront next to them, opens up a cute little restaurant, and he's kind of grumpy and standoffish, but also really nice. And then we have this weird storyline of all of a sudden somebody starts posing as the spice shop on Instagram and posting all of these like very like the white girls who find Ayurveda stuff. So like, look at this like magical spice blend and like calling Ayurveda magic and stuff like that. So then we get that whole madness of like trying to control that publicity that is technically bringing them business but is also like totally against everything that they believe in. And then there's like a whole nother level. There was a lot in this book and I think that it was all just too long. Like the first probably 20% of the book was just chapter after chapter after chapter of our author trying to explain to us what it's like to not want to follow the family business. But it's like, I got that by the first chapter. I really thought that it had so much potential and so many great things, but I wish it wasn't. I think it was like 300, almost 400 pages. It could have been like a little bit less than 300 pages and been great and hard-hitting and sharp. But instead I found myself kind of skimming certain bits where I could tell that she was just going to monologue about not wanting to be in the family business anymore. Because at the end of the day, I felt like the looseness of it made me disconnect from the characters in the story, where I felt like the beginning, how it was set up, had a lot of potential. So you could give it a go for sure. It wasn't a bad book. It was just a long book. The Curious Secrets of Yesterday. Next up, Past Me put this book on hold, and I don't know why. I think I was just looking for thrillers to read because this book came out quite a while ago, and there's a movie made of it that I didn't know. I read The Woman in the Window. This is a classic, like inspired by Rear Window story. It's about a woman who is agoraphobic, and so all she does all day is look out her window and kind of watch her. Where are they? I think they're in Harlem, so like upper East Side neighborhood, watching all of the comings and goings. At one point, she meets her new neighbor, who seems like this really friendly, wonderful woman. And then a couple days later, as she's looking out the window, she sees that woman was murdered, like in front of the window. She just sees like a knife sticking out of this woman and she collapses and there's like bloody handprints down the wall. So obviously she calls the police. She can't run across the road to help because she's agoraphobic. And what does she do when the investigation gets really bizarre and no one believes her because she's the crazy lady who can't leave her house and blah, blah, blah. It was fine as a thriller. I think that I saw a lot of the twists coming. I wasn't super surprised by anything, but it kind of did the job. There were a couple details that I was sort of like, well, that came out of left field. Like, what were you gonna do with that thread? But I mean, Wasn't bad, wasn't good. If you're looking for a thriller to fill the time, The Woman in the Window. And now we get to the book that I feel like affected a lot of my reads previously, when I was kind of saying that things were too long and I was kind of struggling to focus and all this stuff. I feel like this book was running in the background of all my other reads. I started and finally finished The Spear That Cuts Through Water. I have heard nothing but incredible things about this book, and so I pushed myself to finish it, and I stand by the fact that it is an incredible piece of literature. I think that the writing style is so unique and interesting, but man, was that tough to read. Oh, so I normally don't read multiple books at once. I need to focus on one, but for this one, I would just read, it's divided into, I think, 5 or 6 parts. I had to just read one part per day. So this ended up taking a little over a week for me to finish. I don't think I particularly enjoyed it in terms of like, wow, that was a fun read, but I do appreciate it, if that makes any sense. A Spear That Cuts Through Water is difficult to explain. A lot of it is told in second person. It's a lot of you pick up the spear and you listen to your aunt telling the story kind of thing. So how do I explain? Where the story is introduced to us in a kind of more modern time, where our aunt always tells us these stories and legends, and particularly one about the moon god who fell in love with the water god. And then there's this kind of magical theater where if you're lucky, in your dreams, you get to go there and you will be shown this wonderful story, but you probably won't remember it by the time that you wake up. And so then he falls asleep. We go into the dream theater and we follow the story. I think that the plot, if it was written in a slightly different way, I think I would have like enjoyed the plot more, like been more entertained by the plot. But really I just kind of I was so focused on the writing style. It's very, how do I even describe it? There are all of these moments where there will be these sentences in italics that suddenly interrupt the flow of the story. And those are like, we're supposed to be watching this in a theater, right? And there are all of these people in the theater shouting their thoughts. The narrator will be like, and then he walked into the store, and then someone will go, it was my store. Kind of, I am so bad at examples today. I'm so sorry. But so it was very like, again, just written in such an interesting, intriguing way. But we're essentially trying to topple this kind of evil monarchy that has stolen the powers of the gods. I think it was a great feat. I think that it was interesting how it was written, but just in terms of like connecting to the story and feeling really drawn in, it was another one of those books where I felt like I was reading the book instead of being a little more lost in the story. So that was The Spear Cuts Through Water. Give it a try. Pick it up, because I do think it expanded my mind in terms of writing and how you can tell a story and write a book. As a reader, it was a little, I have no words. The Spear That Cuts Through Water. Okay, we're almost done. Last 3. After that, I read What Happened to Ruthy Ramirez. This was a book that I thought was perfectly paced, and I thought it was exactly the right length, and I was like, yes, finally. Because this was just truly the month of books that were a little bit too long, or like lost the plot because it just kind of fell away from them at the end. And I felt like this book, from beginning to end, just like hit every beat. It didn't draw it out. It just like got the job done, and I really enjoyed it. This book follows a Puerto Rican family who lives in New York. It is 3 sisters, a mom and a dad, and one day when the sisters were still quite young, the middle sister just disappeared, was supposed to get on her bus home and never came home. And Ruthy was about 13 years old at the time. There was a missing persons investigation, but of course nothing came of it, and it's just this thing that this kind of ghost that has been haunting the family ever since. So we follow 3 different points of view. We follow the 2 sisters and the mother. And what I loved is that all 3 of them were so distinct. I never had an issue of wondering who was who when I was reading the POVs. They were just like funny and complex, and they felt like real people. And our story mainly starts when the older sister is watching a trashy reality TV show, and realizes that that is Ruthy on the TV. It's been like 13 or so years since she went missing, and the sister's like, what do I do? Like, do we go get Ruthy back? But like, my mom, we can't even talk about Ruthy around my mom, and the younger sister has gone off to college and is kind of trying to distance herself from her family, all this stuff. And so we just follow this family as they figure out what to do, what happened to Ruthy Ramirez. And to make it even more interesting, there's a fourth POV that is Ruthy. I just thought it was really excellent. Again, I'm not really into contemporary family dramas, but something about this just scratched an itch. I thought it was really great. I loved the mother-daughter dynamics. Yeah, I can't really say much more other than I thought that this book did the damn thing, and that is what happened to Ruthy Ramirez. Next up, another story about women, bright young women, in fact. I had heard really great things about this. I got this from Book of the Month and just hadn't gotten around to reading it until now. This follows the president of a sorority who has to deal with the fact that a man came in and killed some of her sorority sisters. And so she's involved in the investigation, but during the investigation, she is contacted by another woman who believes she knows the identity of the killer. And so we find out that this killing might be related to a serial killer who is kind of this Frankenstein monster character of all the kind of, I hate to say quote unquote popular, well-known American serial killers. There's a lot of like, especially at the end, it's like glaringly Ted Bundy-esque, but it just handled it so well. I no longer very interested in true crime. It kind of is one of my icks now. But this just handled the topic so well, and it wasn't necessarily like true crime. It was very just about bright young women and how these women are so dedicated and so intelligent and so determined that they end up making up for all of the very, very stupid men in law enforcement that let all of these women die. So it was just, I thought, really excellent. It's told in multiple POVs and we kind of bounce back and forth between timelines. But I read it in one day. Highly recommend Bright Young Women. And one that I just finished today, this is Boulder. This was a gift from Nathan. Thank you so much. This is a short little book. This follows a woman who works on a merchant ship in South America as like a chef. Her favorite thing in life is just to cut meat. Is basically her deal. She likes a quiet existence where she just gets to be on the open sea, feeding people stuff, and then occasionally coming to land and meeting a beautiful woman to be with for the night. But one day when she stops in a port, she meets a young geologist who ends up making her want to stay on land more than on a boat, which is very bizarre for our main character. And they start a relationship. Our geologist gets a job in Iceland, so they move together to Reykjavik, and we follow that journey with them, where suddenly our main character's partner confesses that she wants to be a mother. We follow her on that journey of what happens when one partner wants to be a mother, the other is not ready to be a parent, has never been interested in being a parent, doesn't want to. And I just thought it had ideas and thoughts about parenthood and motherhood and partnership that I hadn't seen, I had never heard before, like spoken out loud. It does include a lot of talk about pregnancy and birth, and some of it was kind of scary, so just know that. But yeah, overall I thought, as someone who me personally, I'm not interested in being a mother, I found that it was interesting that she doesn't have the same thoughts that I do. It was just kind of refreshing to hear those thoughts and some new things I never thought about parenthood and relationships and how they change after a child and stuff like that. So that is Boulder. I do recommend if that sounds at all interesting to you. And right now, literally today, I'm only on page like 40, so I don't know how I feel about it, but I just started reading Ace of Shades. This is by the same author who wrote All of Us Villains, who I talked about last month, that I really enjoyed. I'm not going to say anything about it because I literally don't know what it's about, but it's a fantasy. That's it. Yeah, that's what I read in January. That's how I started off the year. It was a lot of almost hits. We'll see what the year holds, but overall, not a horrible start. And I will catch you guys next time. I'm trying some new things on this channel this year, so please look forward to my next videos. And if you haven't subscribed yet, I'd appreciate it. So yeah, that's that. Thank you again to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. There will be a link in the description box. First 500 people to click it will get 1 month free of Skillshare. Please start a booktube channel. Please start a bookstagram. Talk about books. It's a really great community, and I think that Skillshare has a lot of tools to help you, whether it's with confidence or simply just figuring out how to organize your beautiful brain. Please check out their learning paths. So I will catch you guys next time. Thank you as always, and let me know what you're reading. Let me know what I should read next. Okay? Catch you then, okay? See you next week. Bye!